Howdy, my name is Saul Quintanilla, and today I'll be doing an introduction over to sea anemones, which are under the phylum Cnidaria, and have a lot of interesting characteristics and traits and just morphology that we can dive deep into and look into. So let's go ahead and get started. So what is a sea anemone? A sea anemone is a marine animal from the order Actinaria in the phylum Cnidaria, and Sedaria are pretty interesting species overall. Include jellyfish, again, sea anemones, things that um, can kind of sting you if you rub against. Um, and sea anemones are really an interesting life, and we can go into what we kind of know what they are, and we'll see pictures later. But first, like, where do they live? And really, they can live anywhere in the oceans. They are marine life, and they're not restricted to any ocean really specifically, which is kind of cool. They're not just in the Atlantic or only in the Pacific. They're kind of all around, and they can go from shore, right off the shore on a coral reef, to deep in the depths of the ocean. There's no limit to where they are. They can be cold and warm environments, and unlike other fish or other marine life where they have a swim bladder or fins and um, are able to have gills, they do not have any of those traits that other marine life have. They do not float. They are on ground, so they typically use their feet to walk. But again, we'll get to more of that later. They do not swim. They do not have fins to um, move around. So, how do sea anemones eat? Sea anemones eat by um, really how any of us would eat, but the way that they catch their food is different. Um, so what happens is anytime here's like the sea anemone's tentacles. Anytime a small plankton or just an animal rubs up against it, it releases a filament called a nematocyst, and it's a harpoon-like filament that stings them and paralyzes their prey and allows them to feed on their food. Food typically is a plankton or small fish, and again, plankton do not have to be small, or the fish don't have to be small. Just depending on the sea anemone size and how, I guess, hungry they are. But there's no limit to what they can um, sting. So, is a sea anemone a predator or prey? As just previously stated, they do capture, kill, and eat their food, meaning that they are a predator. They are carnivores. They purely eat meat. They do not eat any plants, and so that is a cool dynamic of where it kind of looks like they get eaten, but in fact they actually eat pretty much anything that isn't in a good relationship with them. And we'll get to more about relationships later. Um, but yeah, what is so unique about sea anemones? This is a cool slide. I know there's not a lot on here, but just some cool traits, I guess. For most of the sea anemone's life, they will be immobile. They do have um, feet, or kind of what we would consider feet. Um, but once they walk, they find their spot. They are pretty much there for the rest of their lives. They do not move from that spot, mostly because they do help the environment a lot. And we'll get to more of how they help, but also just because they they settle down, they'll start capturing, and they'll be there for most of their lives. Again, going back to what we talked about earlier of how they eat, their nematocysts are unique to them, and to Cnidaria, to where they are able to sting their prey to be paralyzed. Um, and it's a harpoon like, so it's very sharp filaments. It's not just a electrical shock like an electric eel is a sharp, piercing um, pain that the their prey will feel. So, where is the sea anemone located on the tree of life? If you look at the cladogram as in the whole, um, we are on the Porifera, Cnidaria, and protostomes area. Deuterostomes are off and out of the picture. Protostomes are off and out of the picture. Cnidaria is a branch where the sea anemones are located, and again, um, it's all under Kingdom Animalia, but um, with the Kingdom Animalia and the protostomes and Cnidaria and Porifera, it's in the Cnidaria under um, the order Arcrunia, Arcrunaria, and so pretty much it's fairly early on in the tree of life, in the cladogram, um, where it branches off. It's fairly early. It's either the first or second one, depending on what other species you're looking at that branch off. It is not the outgroup in the protostomes Porifera and Cnidaria cladogram, but it is one of the first few to branch off due to um, just its not undeveloped nature, but just the lack of comparing to other animals' developed nature. So here's some pictures of the sea anemone. We'll get to more about the clownfish in this picture, but as you can see, they have an opening in the middle where they typically eat their food. They're not small in general. For the tentacles are very large compared to their body size. Again, this is to help capture anything and everything that they can, so that they can eat. Um, they are small. They're about the size of a fist, a little bigger maybe, or smaller. But um, in comparison, their skin, their tentacles, everything that they have is fairly large if you were to just put on a flat piece, um, on a flat plane. So this is why um, sea anemones are important. Sea anemones are predators, but they also have a symbiotic relationship with clownfish and other selective fish. So that meaning clownfish can enter and not die from interacting with sea anemone. Um, they live side by side, go in hand with one another. And being that sea anemones release nematocysts when triggered, when rubbed against. When clownfish are in danger, they typically go to the sea anemone to get protection, and then the sea anemone, if detects something else that's not a clownfish, will shock the other fish or release the nematocysts to the other fish or other predators trying to eat the clownfish, and then eat that fish, that other predator was trying to eat the clownfish. Very interesting. Not what you'd expect from such a kind of simple creature, um, but very, very unique and diverse, and its morphological and just characteristical traits. Yeah, so um, again, the reason why they're important is without, like, they are part of the corals. Fish, clownfish more specifically, can come find shelter with them, um, and they live in a symbiotic relationship. So they are not gaining anything from one another. The clownfish isn't affected, as neither is the sea anemone. So therefore, they're just symbiotically living together. Every once in a while, they benefit one another, but it's not the main. It's not the main intent of that symbiotic relationship. Here, my works cited. So, the Chadwick Laboratory was an Auburn lab that I read an article over. Um, National Geographic, really liked what their article said. Just kind of gave again. Um, they talked a little bit more about the predator prey nature, and then this Smithsonian National Zoo was just really overall just kind of encompassing what sea anemones are and what they do, and why they are important, but also why we study them a lot. And we study them purely because it's an interesting species that can um, that is a predator but does not look like a predator, and that is also um, a species that can have a symbiotic relationship with other species, more specifically the clownfish. And so that is